So begin by closing your eyes. Be aware of your body. Feel yourself becoming more fully present. Letting your mind settle down. Feel your breath. And as you breathe and continue to relax and settle in, feel your body relaxing. And if there's any tension you notice in your body, that doesn't relax just now, just be aware that that's there and accept it. And let your awareness settle into an openness to any thoughts that are around emotions, bodily states, positive, negative, or neutral. And just let them all be there. Let your awareness become more spacious. Noticing whatever's around, whatever's arising. Just letting it all be. If you find yourself becoming distracted, just bring yourself back to being present. Just open and present to whatever's there. And if it helps, just follow the breath as an anchor. Bring your awareness more fully present. Be particularly mindful of the reality of just sitting. Just being with things as they are. Being content with things as they are. Open to a sense that just sitting in this way is opening to your Buddha nature. Even if it's not a clear or strong experience, just the fact of sitting. Being present. Is an opening to your true nature. moments of discomfort arise in your body, your emotions, doubts arise, confusion. Just accept these states, be present to them, allowing them to be there. Just sitting, just letting go and being present. Even if our human nature, and as our human nature continues to experience different states, we continue to rest more and more deeply in content and acceptance. As a brief introduction to the meditation that we'll do now, this is more along the lines of the kind of practice I described before that works more from the angle of the immediate integration of spiritual unfoldment into our ordinary experience, as opposed to an ascending, introverting, or introspecting kind of a process. A key version of this kind of practice was first expressed in a very strongly developed way in Buddhism that the Buddha called Vipassana, because the Buddha himself practiced the various stages of meditation, such as described in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. In fact, I think it's probably likely that the Buddha was trained in something more or less like Raja Yoga initially, and he mastered those stages. But when he attained Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or at least a stage very close to it, he had a distinct feeling that it still wasn't complete. And to my sense, that's because it wasn't fully integrated yet. Unless you actualize it in the midst of ordinary human experience, it's not a fully matured non-dual state of realization. So the Buddha, in feeling that the state of deep samadhi was powerful and had matured his understanding and consciousness, he still didn't feel it was complete, and so he essentially discovered in his own experience Vipassana, where he decided just to sit with his ordinary experience and just be aware of what was arising without judgment, being concentrated and present, but not selective and not trying to experience anything in particular, just being present. So this became a core to Buddhism, and the many schools of Buddhism that have developed over this millennia since then, as Buddhism moved into other parts of the world, such as into China and Korea and Japan and Vietnam, and north into Tibet, became various schools of Theravada and Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism. One of the key elements to all of these schools, at least the ones that most of the ones I just mentioned, Chan Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Shingon, Tibetan Buddhism, as well as Theravada Buddhism, the oldest school, is that there's some form of this basic presence meditation, awareness-based meditation that's integrated with ordinary life. Whether it's called Zazen or Vipassana or Vipassana or Mahamudra, Dzogchen, it's essentially, there's a key component to it that's the same. And one of the reasons that I'm focusing on that for a version of that for our meditation today is because there's ways of practicing this method that could be called a sort of a direct approach, a direct method, meaning that they are essentially about the best that we can do in our ordinary state to open to the non-dual realization or perspective. Even if it's not very strong, even if it's not something we're immersed in, it's as if there are techniques that might be called bridging or secondary practices, where we do various things to ripen the conditions for advanced spiritual stages. And there's other methods that we could call principal practices or primary practices or essential practices. And those are the ones that more directly attempt to enter into the state of awakening immediately. And that, by immediately, I don't mean like suddenly now, immediately, but rather to have an immediate intuitive sense of that state and try to kind of cozy up to it, you might say. Kind of just attune ourselves to it and actualize it in our awareness. One of the powerful versions of this developed in China and Japan, perhaps about 1,000 years ago or a little more, that came to be known in one of the main Japanese traditions as Shikantaza. I think it was given that name by the Zen master Dogen. And Dogen had a very beautiful realization at one point. He went through various stages of awakening. At one stage, um, he started practicing in his youth, I believe, in his teens. And he had some very profound awakenings and was maturing a great deal. But at some point in his path, I think in his late 20s, he became intuitively preoccupied with a question, which was, if we are already intrinsically Buddha nature, why do we have to work? Why do we have to practice to realize that? And this for him wasn't merely a philosophical or intellectual concern. It was something that intuitively was really bothering him. It was like an existential question. What is the deal? He couldn't really reconcile the state of intrinsic being and the way in which we just naturally are already Buddha nature, and the fact that we go through this whole story of struggling to realize them. So he just sat with this sort of natural koan, this puzzle, until he eventually had a profound awakening about it. And of course, with all deep spiritual awakening, it's difficult to really put it into words, but in his attempt to, he coined an interesting phrase. And the phrase is the two words, practice and enlightenment. And he essentially just joined them. It's like you could put equal signs between them, for instance, and make it one thing. Practice equals enlightenment, or practice is enlightenment. Very often it's just made a conjunction where it's just described as the vision, the view, practice enlightenment, meaning like practice / enlightenment. What he meant by that was, in a certain very paradoxical way, it's not just that we practice to become enlightened. In another sense, we practice because it's just the way enlightenment manifests. As enlightenment unfolds within samsara, as a being becomes enlightened, one of the basic forms it takes is practice. So it's not that we're practicing to achieve enlightenment, we're practicing to express our enlightenment. It's just what enlightenment looks like. And this is how he resolved the dualism between these two. They became one reality. He realized, oh, there's not a separation between the two. So when he expressed this type of practice that he called Shikantaza, at the core of it, what he meant was, this is a way of practicing where you're not only just sitting with your ordinary experience, being present with your human nature, with life, but you're also cultivating a core intuitive attunement to the basic reality that the fact that you're just sitting in this way, for instance, doing Shikantaza. Shikantaza, by the way, means just sitting. And part of what Dogen meant by that is just the sitting itself is actualizing enlightenment. You're sitting because you're expressing the emergence of enlightenment in your nature. And so there's a kind of practice where you rest in the faith that that's true. I'm sitting, actualizing enlightenment, and all it needs to happen is for it to keep ripening to deeper and deeper stages, but I don't need to think of it as something that's away from myself. The fact that I'm sitting here now is enlightenment actualizing, and I just need to kind of release into that deeper and deeper, trusting that that's so, intuitively knowing that that's so. Practice enlightenment. Practice is enlightenment. Practice is your Buddha nature actualizing. So let's give that a try. Let's take 10 or 15 minutes and do some Shikantaza.